Hey, everybody. This is Drew Burdick with the Building Great Experiences podcast. With me today, I have Brian Cullinan, partner at Canopy. Super excited about this conversation. We had coffee, I think about a month or so ago, and had just a great dialogue around the impact of sound on customer and employee experiences. And so, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. Happy to be here. This is great.
Yeah. We got a good topic for today, but first want to start just giving you opportunity to share a little bit about you, your background, how you got here, and kind of what you're doing now at Canopy.
Sure. So my entree in the music business was, hacking away guitar when I was a kid, which turned into playing in some garage bands, which turned into management, which, when I went to school, I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer until I was wrestled away from that, by some folks that talked me into getting engaged in the music business at a very low level. That begot a introductory stint with CBS Records, Sony, which turned into a series of jobs with Sony and Columbia Records, where I did promotion for Columbia Records for a number of years in the Southeast, out of New York, nationally, here in the Carolinas for a stint for a couple of years. And as the regional promotion director for Columbia Records, which was my introduction to Charlotte. I'm back in the late 90s. Charlotte was still budding when Uptown was not yet a catchphrase, and kind of established my roots in Charlotte at that time, and then got engaged with technology. During that time, the Research Triangle in Raleigh was part of my territory, and I dealt with a couple of folks in radio that were really engaged with some folks that were doing some interesting work with streaming. They had been tapped by some of the companies that were working on streaming technology in the Research Triangle. And they pulled me into it because they knew that I was curious about technology too. And then we all became addicted to that. Thinking, oh man, this is going to be the future of the business. Again, this is the late 90s, and streaming had not yet overtaken the music business, but we saw the potential. So I went to my boss and said, hey man, it's going to be about 5 years before this happens, maybe, or perhaps less, but this is going to be a big deal. Who's dealing with this inside of Sony? Who's going to be dealing with the companies that are going to sprout up and are going to become the next thing? And nobody was. So we didn't know what to do, but my boss believed in the idea generally. It's always great to have a boss that has belief, right? And he said, why don't we just create a position? Because I was about to leave. I was like, the fun is going to be happening somewhere else. So maybe I should pursue that. Work for one of these companies that I met. And he's like, no, do it here. We'll just figure it out. So I became, on that day, the first person in the music industry to have a streaming gig. Streaming an outward-facing promotion gig dealing with streaming companies that didn't exist yet. There were only a couple. As a matter of fact, Sirius XM that was on my plate at the time, both Sirius and XM, they hadn't even launched their satellites yet. So that was kind of part of my general purview. But within a couple of years, of course, that stuff started to take off and digital started to take off. Eventually, I became the head of digital and tech for Columbia Records. And during a pretty heavy time in the music business in the early 2000s. And then by 2006, 2007, left that part of the business to pursue some of the entrepreneurial stuff that had excited me along the way. I think I mentioned to you when we were having coffee. It was great to be engaged in conversations at that time in my office and have just about every music tech company come in at some point. We were Columbia Records, the largest record label in the world. You wind up meeting everyone that has a tech idea in music. And most of them would come in, and we'd have these brainstorm sessions, and we'd share a lot of stuff. And then at the end of the year, I'd get a great bottle of wine with a card that would say, hey, guess what? We just secured our, next round of funding, and this is the big one. And we're taking this thing all the way. And hey, thanks for the memories and the ideas and all that. That's where the action is happening. That's fun. These guys are going to continue to have that level of fun that we had in my office. And I'm dealing with a lot of incurious people inside the music industry that are still trying to figure out whether or not my department is there to fix their computer when they download a virus, right? It was an awkward period in the music business. So I decided to strike out on my own. It was a big management change at Columbia. It gave me the opportunity to think about some other things and go outside the company and do my own thing. I had this explosion that I think a lot of people have when they leave. I've been inside a big company for a long time. All this pent up energy happened, and I need to do these things, start these 3 companies and do this and house and and redecorate, somebody else's house or something, all these things that I needed to do at the time. So I just kind of went crazy, which is in a good way, maybe. Came back to Charlotte because I thought Charlotte was a great launching pad at the time. There was this spirit of transition that was happening. There was an entrepreneurial spirit that was here. It's easier to get things going than it is in a lot of other places, especially from where I was in New York. And I had a house here. I was like, what? This is where I need to be. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to launch it out of Charlotte. So the first thing I did was start a magazine, which some in this market may be familiar with that. I
Yeah.
brought products, and former Shuffle employees are going to love the fact that I still have magazines within arm's reach, and I do.
Love it.
This was a labor of love, but I started Shuffle magazine, which was a regional music and culture magazine. Independent grassroots music in the Carolinas, North and South Carolina. And we had a great time for 6 or 7 year run of Shuffle, doing live events, promoting bands, helping artists launch and reach next levels here within the Carolinas, and just generally just covering the abundant and wonderful music scene that is the Carolinas music scene here. That was a fantastic introduction into like the real depths of grassroots music here in the Carolinas. And we got to know a lot about just how people commune with music. I think that's important in the next steps that I had a number of consulting clients that I was dealing with in the tech space, and I was kind of a little bit of a mixed in ombudsman and a think tank partner, and helping some tech startups go in music. But one of my clients was a company called Muzak, which was headquartered here in Fort Mill at the time, and was a business background music provider, meaning that provided music to retailers to play in store in the background. Largest in the business, this behemoth company. They've been around for 75 years. As a matter of fact, I helped them launch their 75th anniversary party. But it really sat out the music business and really wasn't engaged. And a new CEO had come in and said, "Hey, we want to engage the music business. We think that there's power there. We think that there's a lot of synergy that we're missing. Let's see how we can connect these ends." So we did, and did some exciting things. I got to learn a lot about how background music affects the everyday lives of people. I mean, if it was a radio station, if you counted it kind of as a radio station in terms of its broadcasting music and a lot of people are listening, it would be the largest radio station. More people, more ears are tuned in to their programming than anything else. It blew my mind at the time. And as a promotion person, I thought, oh God, this beacon that's broadcasting all this music has this incredible power to reach people. This is fun. Let's do some interesting things with this. So we did. And there were a couple of changes there. And, I had a chance to work with an awesome team. And that awesome team, at one point, we all turned to each other and said, "Hey, let's try something entrepreneurial." And that was kind of the formative moment for Canopy. And so Canopy Media is the company that we started kind of out of the primordial ooze of the advanced thoughts of how we can engage with retailers and music at that level at Muzak. And we've had an incredible time trying to stay kind of on the bleeding edge of where music and retail and customers meet and how music affects the customer experience, and really exploring that and shaping music landscapes around brands. And, with the idea, we walk into a customer location, we walk into a customer meeting, and our job is to figure out what that brand sounds like. And that is incredible fun every day. And so that's kind of my background. That's how I got here.
Yeah, dude, wonderful story. Even better the second time. I love, no, I love hearing. I mean, obviously you've had a storied career, right? You've worked at Columbia Records, which is huge. You've worked at Muzak. You've done a lot of these things. I think what's really fascinating to me about you is that you've kind of like stayed, the thread through all of it was music and how, and the impact it had on people. One of the things that we talked a little bit last time is how it's something that often people forget. They don't think about. Like I'm thinking, most likely most of the people listening to this podcast haven't really truly considered like the impact that sound has on the experience for employees and customers as they're going about their daily life, right? You're walking down the aisle in a grocery store, right? There's music playing. Probably in the back of your mind, you're aware of it, but you're not actively thinking about it. And so it's a really important piece of life. And I think, to your point at the beginning of the call, like it's such a drumbeat for humanity. And it is a really important consideration, as well as all the other senses, right? But anyway, I wanted to spend some time talking about that intersection. Like, what is it? What is the intersection, and why should we care? Why should anyone pay attention to the impact of soundscape and music on the customer and employee experience?
Sure. So, at a basic level, think about walking into a retail store of any kind. Put yourself in that position. You walk in. The only thing that's always on when you walk in there, in terms of your sensory experience, are your ears, right? Unless you have earbuds in, you walk into a store and, we think a lot about visual brand. We think a lot about, when we talk about in-store customer experience, we think about the look and the feel, and even the smell, right? To the extent that companies like Scent Air exist, especially in malls. You walk past certain stores in the mall and you're like, and you know the brand immediately because your nose picks it up. It's like, oh, that is definitely, X, Y, or Z, because it smells like, Axe, Axe body spray. Or so you walk into most modern retail environments and it's this kind of sensory attack of sight and sound and touch and feel, and couches that feel a certain way. But sound is a sensory experience. And it's the only one of those things that's always on. You can avert your gaze from different elements of visual branding, but you can't turn your ears off unless you put something in them. So for the most part, that experience is going to follow the customer from the moment they walk into the store to the moment that they leave. So how you paint that landscape and how true that is to your brand is kind of the first part of how we dive into what that experience should be, is important. And also, inspirationally, how that makes the customer feel, the mood and tone of that sets in the environment and the shopping. Is someone feel engaged? Are their senses open? Right? Like, music and cognition have an interesting intersection. Muzak that first did a study on this, like back in the 1950s, 1956 study, where they looked at worker productivity. And they said, there's this, when we play music and these poor people that are in a box, and I don't know what they're making something in a factory. We never learned what it was, but they played music, then they didn't play music, and then people that are taking notes, and you can imagine this 1950s environment. And at the end of the day, they figured out that when they played music, there were fewer mistakes. I think it was 0.7 increase in productivity and 34% less mistakes. And we know this intuitively, right? Because like, if you remember in college, like sometimes, I would put music on to study, and I don't know why. Like, it was like, I thought I was doing it to distract myself and to kind of, make the study experience a little better. But then when I thought about the music that I was listening to, I thought, am I listening to a specific type of music that's very calming? And, having taught, I taught a music industry class, and occasionally I still do at App State, trying to figure out, I'm not a college professor. I just play one occasionally at App State when I'm teaching their record label course. But, trying to figure out how students study, and I'm reading this about it, and all of a sudden I come across this information that, so many more students today are using music, kind of chill music in the background to study with, how it becomes just kind of part of the environment. I was like, oh, that's kind of what I did too. Oh, this makes sense. And why is it chill music? Well, because it opens up that part of your cognition. It opens up your thinking a little bit. It calms you, and it is a gateway, provides a little bit of a gateway to new ideas and to thinking. And oh, wait a minute. That's exactly what we want our customers to do when they walk into our store, right? Like, especially if we're trying to introduce things that are a little challenging from the standpoint of either a product that they haven't experienced before, an experience that they're not familiar with, or a price tag maybe that's a little challenging in some cases, right? Like, this is going to start to set the environment, to open up your thinking and calm you to where you can be focused. So music is instrumental in that. And then music is also instrumental in that part of mood that allows you to feel good about the fact that you're in that store and that you're developing some level of trust with what it is that people are doing, right? Like, you can probably, and Drew, I think we talked about this high school experiment that I had that like also kind of informed what we do in a strange way, but I'll mention it again. My first day of the high school the high school that I went to had a homeroom class. That was the first 30 minutes of every day where everyone collected, and then you went on and you did your thing throughout the day. But that was the kind of a commune. And the idea was that you'd have the same class for 4 years, and this was your cohort. So on the first day of class, the teacher in the class needed to establish, like, hey, you're going to be with these people for 4 years, get to know who they are. So what does she do? She has 30 minutes to kind of set that introduction. She says, I want everybody to go up on the blackboard with the chalk, and write 3 of your favorite bands. Not your 3 favorite, but just the first 3 that come, like, just throw 3 bands up. And so, everyone gets up, and very quickly you realize by writing 3 bands on the board, you knew exactly who was who in that room. So I get up and I write, the Clash, the Sex Pistols, and things like the Dead Kennedys. The guy right behind me was like, yeah, that's my stuff too. And we still, decades later, right? That's the power of music. Like, that was the power drawing it. Yeah. And I could tell, that person that wrote, Waylon Jennings and this up on the board, like they got into a little group, and they probably still talk to each other too, but music was that common cultural currency that brought us together. And so in the same way, when you walk into that retail environment, like, who is this brand? Like, should I trust them? Do they get me? Do I understand this? Like, music, in terms of it being that cultural currency that's very fungible, I feel like I'm in the right place. Like, they're playing music that's familiar to me. It seems like this music is being played for me a little bit to some extent. Some of it's a little challenging, but in a good way. Yeah, this feels like a place where I should be. And then that level of comfort, trust develops, and you want to stick around for more than 5 minutes, right? And that's kind of part of what we do. So yeah, that's the intersection, right? That's where music starts to intersect with commerce. And there's some hard data to suggest that the type of music that you play, there's a study that was done at the University of Washington that says, they took bottles of wine and played different types of music, and they asked participants to rate the price of the wine. And of course, as they approached classical music and jazz and stuff like that, the perception of the price of wine, the perceived price of that bottle increased, right? So music had the power to turn a $20 bottle of wine into a $50 bottle of wine because it helped set that where somebody was challenged and thinking, it's classical music. This must be, a higher end product. I feel that I'm in a more aspirational environment. This must be an expensive thing.
Yeah.
From a hard data standpoint, there's data that suggests that, time spent shopping, perceived price, all of those things are affected by music. But then on the other side, on the softer side, we know that music is just something that delivers comfort, that ties people together and can make you feel at home in a brand very quickly when you have very little time to do so.
I think what's fascinating, love the data too, like the actual real evidence. Like, this isn't just like some woo-woo thing. This is like, there's science behind it, right? People, their behavior is influenced by these sort of outside factors, and you can not pay attention to it and just sort of like hope for the best, or you can intentionally design around and say, hey, what is the, experience? What's the atmosphere that we want people to feel? And therefore sort of influence their behavior. We had a really good dialogue about the employee part of this too, right? Because I think there's probably some folks who are listening who are like, well, I'm not a consumer brand. This doesn't apply to me. This isn't important. I'm, hey, log off. But there's like such an important component, which is around the employees. And so give a couple quick examples. When I do workshops, so I do a lot of these like strategy workshops, design thinking workshops. Almost always, I will try to play something that's like a low key, chill sort of background music while, people are working, because it helps them get into the like state of mind, to your point about studying, where they're like more creative, they're more innovative. They're not distracted by the buzzing on their phone and they can kind of go in that, mode where they're like, I'm creating ideas. I'm coming up with things, right?
You had right, just slightly challenged, like aspirational enough, just on the edges.
Yeah.
Slightly challenge them a little bit. Boy, this feels like an environment where I need to kind of step up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And it like, it's different than because a lot of the times these are in corporate environments. So you've got people who there isn't really music playing. So when you introduce this, like, I'm going to play music that maybe you wouldn't hear in a corporate environment, or it's like a lo-fi, mellow kind of, it just automatically creates an atmosphere of like, okay, this is different than my normal day job. Like, this is typically, I'm, sitting here in this stale environment, or sterile environment, and I'm just doing my thing. But like, now it feels much more immersive. That's just one example. I think, when we were sitting in the coffee shop, you made a really great case about how, like, if you're an employee and you're working in a coffee shop or wherever you may be working, if you've got like droning loud music that's just like invading your senses, and just like it's gonna agitate you, right? Over time, you're gonna get irritable, you're gonna be frustrated, and then that's gonna come through in how you're communicating with customers. And so it's like there's sort of this, if you are intentional about it and you say, all right, I don't want to play the same 50 songs over and over and over again every single day, because my employees are just going to burn out, right? And they're going to just hate their jobs and be irritated at customers. How do I make this so that they enjoy their day, their days working, and they're able to provide better service to customers?
And that's a great point, Drew. It's a huge part of what we do. So it's also what separates us from just like a general streaming service. I mean, maybe this is a good chance to take a step back and say, what does separate you from the streaming service? Two things, really. We just covered one, and I'll dig into that a little bit. But the other is legality, right? that when you use music in a business environment, and that's any business environment, a retail environment, in a workshop, in a design studio, it's considered a different use. And that Spotify license that you have, the personal license for your personal account or your Pandora account does not cover that use, right? Because you're broadcasting with a personal account, you're broadcasting to one, and they consider maybe a few friends if you have a small speaker. But the consideration for business is that you're broadcasting to many, and you have to pay a royalty that's slightly different. So if that royalty is not being paid, technically you're in infringement, and that's what separates us from just general streaming. So if you're using just a consumer streaming account to pipe into your business, then you're not covered, right? And occasionally ASCAP, BMI, CSAC goes after people. We just dealt with one of those earlier today, where we're having to go through some stuff with ASCAP right now to ensure that the client is covered, and they are. But that could have gone the other way because there's no granted commercial license implied in a Spotify. And the other thing that we do is our programming algorithms are very different than streaming. Streaming is about making your ears feel good, not necessarily a bunch of ears, right? And it's also taking into account that you're listening in patches and spurts, whereas an employee is kind of a captive audience for an entire stretch of time for 8 or 9 hours. They're going to be listening to the same channels. We set a much higher burn rate on music, meaning that we have to, incumbent upon us to make sure that there's more music used. Whereas, let's just take a commercial radio station, for example. The top played songs at a commercial radio station might spin 50 to 70 times a week on like a pop station, or 30 or 40 times a week on a rock station. Employees would be pulling the speakers out of the ceiling if they were hearing stuff like,
right.
And it's the same song 5 times a day or 10, like, my God. And the thing is with music too, just like anything that involves the senses, you don't always know that it's happening. A lot of it is subliminal, right? So you're in that environment and, you're stocking a shelf, or you're trying to get a design right for a client. You're working through something, and you heard that song now for the 5th time, and you're frustrated. You don't necessarily know why. It adds to the kind of cacophony of other things that are going on too. Like, my boss is pushing me on this deadline and this. So it's one of those things that you want to make sure to get right. But yeah, you can burn employees very easily on music, both on repetition and on genre. So we treat repetition very differently, which is very tricky because you also want to play music that's familiar in ways that keep people engaged. So there are a lot of tricks that we have to employ to bring in music that, okay, maybe it's the same artist, similar song in a slightly different way, but it's not the same song, and your brain isn't going to process it the same way, right? Maybe it's an adjacent artist that you wouldn't necessarily listen to, wouldn't come up in your Pandora stream necessarily, but it's going to remind you of that artist that you think you should be listening to right now, but you don't want to be listening to 15 times a day, right? So we work around that and create a landscape that stays away from repetition and involves a lot of diversity, which is really important because absolutely, and there are plenty of studies to back this up as well. If you repeat music, if you bombard people with music that they don't want to hear, repetitive, you will burn them, and that will happen inside any environment. And the other big mistake is that owner mistake of, this is my jukebox. I founded this hypothetical muffin company, right? This is my muffin recipe. I am the guru of the muffin. I am therefore also the guru of the soundscape, right? Like, these are the songs that remind me of these muffins, and and let's be honest, and this applies to, you could be a programming shop, right? Like, I know the tone that I want to set. That's my dog I bring in here to kind of set that environment. This is my, choice of couches that we meet on. This is, these are my treatments. And this is also my music. This is my cool space, right? This is my living room, and this is my jukebox in my living room, right? And not everybody's going to be along for that ride. And as a matter of fact, you want to create diversity. You bring people into an environment. You don't want them to all, conform to one thing or the other. And, music is a part of that. Like, there's different music tastes. You have great people. Like, you might have a room full of programmers. You got all people that are in EDM, people that are in hip hop, people that are into both, people that are rock. And this guy's in the country for some reason, and you don't want to continually challenge them to have to sustain that environment every day, right? So you have to find common denominators. I think you nailed it with, well, one way to find a common denominator is sometimes just chill background music is a way of being non-specific, where you're not picking up any of those cues. Like, and what are the cues? The cues are cultural cues, right? Certain psychological cues in music, like, for instance, the first song that I ever danced with another person too, right? I'll never forget, right? That is a psychological cue that anytime that song is played, I'm driving down the road, I'm like, oh, I mean, remember with junior high dance, like and it's going to take me back to that moment. I'll be lucky if I keep the car on the road and I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, but that's a really strong cue, right? And then you think about all those life memories that are associated with music. That first time that you went out and did this or that, and that song that was playing and that crazy thing that you did. And then you heard that song on that concert that you went to. So those cues are always there for people, and they're more prevalent the more popular a song is, right? Because the more opportunity people had to hear it. And then there are some genre clues. Like if you said, hey, set a mood right now, and I started playing Lee Greenwood, everyone would know what I was doing, right? Like if I started playing Proud to Be an American, right? And so you have to be cognizant of those things too. Like when you start broadcasting songs, especially when there's a higher level of popularity, there's going to be baggage associated with that, good, bad, indifferent with those songs. So I like the direction that you took it in because we consult clients on this that have non-retail environments all the time. Like, yeah, consider music that's productivity oriented. And we have some wellness oriented clients in the medical space that we've dealt with as well. And that's that type of environment too. It's like, we're not looking to be specific. We're not really looking to set a brand. But we're looking to calm people down and make them feel good about where they are and to build trust. Like, how do we do that with music without being really specific? So I think you can do that in a non-retail environment in a great way, kind of a chill level of music, how you do it, how you get into it, what your environment is, how you tailor it. There's a lot of nuance in that, but that's essentially, you can burn employees, you can challenge employees in a bad way to kind of endure the environment if it's something that they're not really into. And you can just kind of create a tone that is a little bit mildly oppressive, right? Like, it's like, you're forcing this music, you're forcing these memories on me, you're forcing these thoughts upon me, you're forcing me to engage with cultural cues that I like or don't like, or just, and all of that is embedded in that music that you're playing. So hate to be a downer about music in that way, because like there's probably some person that's listening right now that's like, man, I just press play in my office, like, and I have like a little boombox set up, and it's like a little mini speaker, and just like, I think it's cool to just share like my Grateful Dead collection ish with my employees, and that's great. It's like, yeah, but there might be somebody that's like sitting across the room. It's like, oh my God, my mom played that every day and I can't stop. So yeah, there's a lot that's inherent in you.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting thought, because so in my world, we do a lot of customer research, customer analysis, and the lens is typically like, it's the process, it's the technology, it's the, how the organization is like servicing the customer. But like when you and I talked, it was just a really fascinating topic, because I'm like, yeah, like we, in human-centered design, it's all about like putting the people that you're serving at the center, and really considering like, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are their, goals and challenges, and, those types of thoughts. And there's the concept of inclusive design, which is kind of touches on what you're discussing. And it's this idea that if you're designing experiences for everyone, then you have to really think about the impact that certain decisions will have on humans, right? Like a great example of bad version of this is people who are experiencing homelessness, right? About 10 years ago or so, maybe more, 15, cities and towns, municipalities started to design public spaces in such a way that it was like uncomfortable for someone experiencing homelessness to be able to like lay down or sleep or use public, and it's interesting because there's a lot of thought about this, but like people, you can design it for the good or you can design it for the not good. And you have to just like keep in mind, like, who are the people, and, not to like pick one side or the other, but like with the public spaces and people experiencing homelessness, right? There's a case to be made for, well, maybe we shouldn't design public spaces that are hurting people. But then there's also a case to be made for, well, is this enabling, right, this type of behavior? Should we do something different? And so I think it's just, I love this conversation because I think it's important that people like just ask the questions, like think about it, right? Like think about the effect that music has on the people around you, because it creates a more purposeful approach to what you're doing as a business.
And I'll take that one step further to riff on that a little bit. Why don't we have public music spaces that, in the case of people that are experiencing homelessness, why isn't there, a municipal space that also includes, if we know that music has a calming effect, if we know that music has this communal effect that draws people together, why don't we have communal music spaces where people can experience that? And just so, yeah, that just popped in my head when you said that, because I'm always thinking about how music can
Yeah.
bring people together, or worst case scenario, push them apart. But in the case of, how we use music, yeah, we're proactive in saying, like, I would love the world covered with music, not in a bad way, and not so it's oppressive, but so that at every opportunity we have to make that handshake and to have that communal bond, that if music is kind of the glue or the introductory sensory cue that pulls that together, then let's do that. Let's try that. So yeah, my first thought with that was like, gee, well, I wonder why we don't have like public music spaces.
Yeah.
Like, and especially since there's a lot of thought that's gone into medication to calm people down. We talk about being in an over-medicated society. Music has been used for time immemorial to develop that sense of calmness, to help flush that out. And I wonder if we wouldn't be better served by having music space. We have quiet spaces. Like, could we also have music spaces that induce the same kind of feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. It'd be interesting. You think about, like, in a lot of the, like corporate world, there's like these quiet rooms, to your point. Like, I was actually at a co-working space earlier, and they have a, like, almost like a classic library room where you go and it's kind of like low key. They even have some kind of like white noise in the background, right? But it'd be interesting if you were like, hey, if you want to, here's your like inspiration room, inspiration space, and that has a different vibe and different atmosphere, different music. Yeah, it could be really cool. I think these are the kinds of things where, like, I hope that people who are listening to this, it's like provoking or triggering thoughts and ideas around, like, hey, maybe, for example, if you're a manufacturing company and you have employees that are working on the floor and they're being inundated with like loud machinery, heavy noise, what are you doing to combat that? Is it sound, no sound things, or if a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, we were talking to a large Fortune 500, and we were talking with their HR executive, and we were discussing, like, what would it look like to have, you mentioned the impact of music on mental health, like play certain types of music to improve, mental health. Like, what would that look like? And, looking into sort of doing a research study around it. And COVID kind of blew that up because, suddenly everybody was back at home. And
everyone was at home in their own music environment again.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just a really fascinating conversation.
We do this. Yeah, we do this, right? We know that we do this with the other senses. Like, if you go into any, progressive oriented work environment where somebody's actually trying to think through employee wellness, there's going to be an outdoor space where people get to experience, like, the feel of the sun and the smell of the outdoors or something, just to kind of change up the workday, or, visual, some type of visual environment that may change, whether it's, a pinball machine and you get to engage with that, the lights and the sounds and the different things. But, we really don't think a lot about the music part. It's another sense. It's another way to get you out, pull you out of your environment, to give you a little bit of a palate cleanser. So yeah, I love that idea. And yeah, I agree. This is the type of thing that hopefully that people listening are like, people that are smarter than us, and say, man, I've got this great idea for like this, collaborative environment that involves music, and it's kind of a listening chamber, and but yeah, an environment where you would be able to just do a little bit of palate cleansing in your day. Hey man, I have been sitting and staring at this computer screen for 3 hours and I just need to go do that palate cleanse. Sometimes I do it out on the back porch, of this place. Sometimes I do it in the cafeteria area that they have set up to where I can engage something in a different way. Sometimes I just go sit in that chill room, and the chill room is programmed in such a way that it pulls off two things. It's like, it gives me that oral palate cleansing, but it also gives me a communal spirit because I know that they did it for me. Like, there's something and I know that my coworkers help in a collaborative way build this. So I'm kind of pulling off those twin, goals and that could be really, so yeah, we just riffed an entirely new space that hopefully will be a part of every office landscape, in America of the next 10 years. But yeah, but that's the power of music, right? We know that music has a power. Like, when you sit back and you say, and you think through those, when I hear a song, it's almost robotic, like Love's Dog. It's like there's things that happen, and then if you really drill down on that, it's like, okay, outside of familiar songs, if I hear a certain tone, I do certain things, or I think certain ways, or I'm open to certain ways to feel, and that's the power of music. So it can be deployed in those types of spaces. It can be deployed in a retail environment to help somebody kind of feel at home within a store or understand a new concept. If it's a showroom that you have for something, if you're introducing something to a client, I've always wondered, like, if you're making a multi-million-dollar pitch to a client and they walk into the room and you've placards up and you have, multiple screens and you've done like, if you thought through the music part of that, because that's part of the full court press of the experience when they walk in, it's like, how do they feel? And have you thought about what that feels like, what that's aspirationally, like what that's supposed to feel like when they walk in? Probably you know what you want them to feel like. How is music, silence, or how is it in the way that we play between music and silence? How is that helping that kid? And we've experimented a little bit with that. We've done it ourselves. I think to great effect. Like we love to play with music and we know the power of it. But I think it would be interesting for us to get engaged on that level too. Like I'd love to be able to get into a couple of projects where it was like, hey, we have a big pitch. We have a client coming in next month and it's on transportation. It's in this, train project maybe. And this is how we want people to feel. Okay. It'd be so cool program to help you curate that environment, right? That's the power.
That's right. It's funny. So I'm actively right now, my team and I are working on a project where we're architecting a client journey for a B2B company. And some of the things their business model, they're going and doing pitches and we've been talking a lot about like, how do you create that immersive experience in the sales process that differentiates you, that, causes them to feel in a different way than just like a standard, like, man, here's a deck, here's some words, here you go, wire stuff, here's how much it costs, sign on the dotted line, right? And I think, honestly, I've talked about this before on the podcast, like, as we look forward for the next, years to come, I think brands that are investing in differentiated experiences are the ones that will win. Like, everything is becoming the same, like the sea of sameness is consuming all of it. And, I think that in order to really separate yourself, you're going to have to think critically and differently about how are we meeting our customers where they are? How are we, empowering our employees? What are the things that we're creating or not creating, right? That's going to cause a customer or an employee to feel different way. And that's the thing that's going to stand out. Like, if you go to any kind of retail store and it all just feels like meh, right? And you're just like, well, why am I going to go? So I'll just go buy it online and it's nothing different. Like, it's all stale and sterile and meh. But if you walk into a store and you're like, whoa, like you're transported into like a different place and you're like, this is amazing. I got to come back here. Like, you're going to tell everybody, you're going to, you're going to spread the word, and it becomes this like really visceral moment that, I don't know, I think brands are going to have to think about this stuff in the years to come,
I totally agree. And I think, when I think about the positive shopping experiences that I reach for, or the just experiences with spaces that I reach for, right? Because we're fighting this battle every day between the virtual and the physical space, because you're right. I just had, a box of something delivered to the door here not too long ago, and it was easy. And, I didn't need to engage in a retail space to get there, to get what I needed. What's the excuse for me to do otherwise, to go out and engage in that physical space? And to the extent that you still want customers brought into physical space, because, that's where your pitch happens. That's where your sale happens. That's where you develop layers of value, because I agree, everything else is commoditized. The guy that just delivered that box is the guy that's going to deliver the competitor's box tomorrow. So that's not it. That's not the experience. And they're like, here, sign here. And that's it. That's my experience. So what am I, I'm reaching for extra. Like, I'm reaching for that space that I can go in. Like, if I think about all the environments that I crave that aren't that are actually physical environments, I'm thinking about places where I walk into and I browse and I think and I'm challenged a little bit. Like, I've vitamins, like for some reason, like last week, I was like, I won't buy vitamins online. Like, maybe, some staple things here and there, but I need to go into an environment where somebody can say, hey, here's what you need, or I'm looking or feeling or reading and receiving information. And I'm going to walk out of there with vitamins and different things and supplements that I had no idea. So I'm in this health kick right now. And that's just not going to happen digitally for me, right? I want that environment. I want that collaborative, informative environment. And then you have to unpack that for a minute and say, well, how do you get there? How do you create that environment? Because it could be very sterile. It could be just as sterile as the digital environment. And you walk in and there's just some stuff there and just like, well, what is the difference? Like, it's the feel, it's the tone, it's the mood that's set when I walk in there. It's the, it's bits and pieces of things, music being a part of that. Like when I walk in, I want to feel like I'm in a place and in a space to where I can think, take a moment, and have some time, and look at a couple of different bottles, and I don't feel rushed. And music can help abut all of that, right? Like in terms of a brand, sensory, in-store, environmental experience.
Yep.
So we're very cognizant of that when we're saying it's like, if that's what you're looking to do, if you have a customer that's coming in that you're looking to challenge, you want them to spend 5 minutes. And we're talking to grocery stores about this now. We have a lot of grocery store clients. I want to say that we're about the third largest provider to grocery stores just by happenstance in the country. And we have deal with some big names. And there's a grocery chain that reached out to us and said, hey, we really want to take this the next step, like a considerably sized chain. We love what we're doing with music. We want to take it one notch further, and came to us with some ideas, and we spitballed some things and some really progressive stuff that even involved sound shaping. Like, in other words, being able to put certain sounds on certain spots, through audio technology, and think about this, like how much fun you can have with this in the retail environment. Like, walk into a grocery store and you look over to your right, and it's the beginning of summer, and there's like a, suntan lotion, like kiosk or display or something. And when you approach that environment, it gets warmer, because there's a heat lamp mechanism or something that's putting some radiant heat down on that spot.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you start hearing beach sounds, and you start hearing waves. And then you're approaching that, and as you come a little bit closer, now you're starting to hear maybe a little bit of Peter Tosh, maybe a little bit of Bob Marley, like in the background, and with the waves and the whole thing, you're standing in front of that display, and you're already there. Like, you're already, like, we've put you in that, we've put you in that mindset. So you're having fun.
Yeah.
And like, it's different. And it's like, but, for us, being able to kind of, think about how that unpacks, like how that when that moment that you're engaged and you're curious and you're thinking, how does music play into that? Like, it's all the little things that you do that are leading up to that, just like leading up to that kiosk with the something, like everything that you do to lead up to that is important, and it builds that. And then you're at the doorstep, and there you're thinking and you're engaged, and that's so much different than that digital experience. To us, at least, that's the holy grail of the retail experience, because you still can't replicate that in your living room, in your pajamas, having some anonymous delivery driver drop something at the door, and maybe ring the doorbell, maybe not. And if we can get retailers and others to that level of engagement, then we've done our job, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love it. I had this thought after our first conversation, and it was this notion that as you look to like the next 10 years, you're almost going to have people who are like, it's like an experienced orchestra, right? And like in keeping with the music theme, where you're kind of conducting this, these different components of the experience to create this atmosphere that your consumer or your employee, they're immersed in, right? They're able to feel a certain way. And it becomes less of this rote, like box checking, like, we have the customer data platform implemented. We have our CRM implemented. We, our products are here. Our processes are this way. It's like, how do all of these components come together to create beautiful music and create an environment that people walk away and they're like, man, that was fantastic. I think that's where I think there's going to be this shift in the marketplace where people like you and I are going to be those conductors. We're like conducting the orchestra of the experience. And it's like, all right, we need a little bit more of this, like brass instruments, wind, like
That's right.
We're kind of like, and it's not like a one size fits all, like everyone just gets just, make your music this way and make your process that way and have your CRM. It's like, it's going to be much more of this. You're so in tune with your business and the customers that you serve that you're able to kind of be like, we need a little bit of more timpani here, right? Or whatever.
Just a pinch.
Yeah, like just a little bit more, right? It's not this like sort of just like brass.
I think that's brilliant. That's exactly it, right? Like that's where this where the discipline in general is kind of converging. we realize that the only reason it's not happening right now is because there aren't those interconnections. Maybe there isn't that level of curiousness that's brought us to, really develop a lot of those areas out to finer points. But it is all happening right now because we're seeing success among those that are doing it right. Again, intuitively, we understand that environment is so important, especially to, the upcoming generations of consumers that are out there that are looking for excuses to engage in physical environments. And we know what they're craving. We know that they're craving those communal physical experiences where they can grab them. And if you're not delivering that, then there's no reason for that to happen. And that applies to both retail experiences where you're challenging, yourself to kind of pull customers in, or general business environments where it's like, how do I get people back to the office? How do I make this make sense? Why do people want to work here? Why do people want to stay here? Why do people want to collaborate in this type of environment or try to be smart in this type of environment to develop new things? Like, how am I working towards all that? And I agree, everything down to the thumbtack level is essential and important. And I believe that as we enter the era of AI, nuance and precision, and we're going to be washed over with levels of detail that we haven't seen before in everything in life. And this is part of it. But AI, really, this is more human and intuitive. AI won't be able to do this, so we'll have to become human, right? We'll have to really think through every detail, think through every environment, custom tailor and deliver bespoke experiences for every brand and every environment, regardless of what you're doing. Because it's so important. And, the other thing too is that the average person is bombarded with so much more sensory experiences. Media is everywhere, and they almost expect it to, right? Like silence is not necessarily a good thing. It's a good thing sometimes, but it's like, if you're not speaking to them in the way that they're used to communicating with brands and experiences and other things, then you're going to start to disengage with customers and disengage with them because they're going to think you're just not that. You just don't have anything to say, right? So I think it's important that those spaces are filled in too, that you show some effort in being able to say, yeah, this environment we thought through how to engage with you in this. You don't have to push us. We pulled you. And that's a really important part of what we want to do. And I think that's why also if there are folks that are sitting back right now that work at agencies, don't have an audio component to what it is they do, it's like, what are you waiting for? Like, if you we've developed the brand scheme for you. We went through, we have empowered you and delivered this wonderful brand to you. And all of a sudden there's this other aspect that you realize, this audio aspect. It's like, yeah, well, down to like, is there a jingle or a cue that we use for this particular business to identify? Because we know, I don't need to introduce the data on that. We know that works for the biggest companies in the world, and it's very important. Every time you turn on your television set, there's a jingle or a cue that introduces you to a brand, and automatically that recall happens, and you're like, okay, I remember everything that I'm supposed to remember right now about HCA. Remember everything I'm supposed to remember right now about Intel. Remember everything I'm supposed to. So, those jingle cues are important too, just in a burst. That if you've taken all the time to develop down to the level of the carpet and the couch and the design of an interior space in an office or in a retail environment, and you're not picking from a list of popular fonts to develop that logo, right? Like, this beautiful bespoke logo that's been well-researched and everything else in it, and then you kind of fall down on that last mile with the audio. It's like, and the assistant manager's Spotify account, right?
Yeah.
You think, who's also technically going to get you in a fast step for BMI, find you out on that. It could be a $75,000 infringement case. And that's another story. But just from a brand perspective, like, yeah, put the effort in on that level. Like, do that little bit of extra, and your customers and your employees are going to appreciate it, right? You'll feel better about what you're doing too, because it's like, I feel like we're doing this. Like, it feels, it sounds, it looks right. Like, I know that we're being true to this brand or this idea or this type of environment that we're trying to set. Like, we have it all covered, and it's going to be those folks that are going to come in. They're going to be able to be the orchestra conductors, I agree, and check the math on all of it and say, yeah, you got this down. Here's the aspects of check this box. And yeah, you sound like what you're trying to say, like your promise. Are you living up to your promise and what customers or employees are hearing in their ears? Yes, you are. Okay. And that's important.
Yep. I kind of a thought to close that, and then we'll go to our last question. So have you seen, there was a couple years ago, the movie, they remade The Mummy, and it was like Tom Cruise, I think, was in it.
Yeah.
And they did a I think there was a leak or something, and they had basically the trailer came out, but it was not. They had like Foley artists hadn't done the dubbing yet. They hadn't put in the audio, and it was like comical. Like it was so bad. And I think that like I share that
That's
because
so funny.
yeah, it was like, I mean, it was, he's like falling out of a plane, and it's just like it's just this like weak little.
It's crazy you mentioned that, because like for some reason that popped into my, not that particular film, but like that thought popped into my mind this morning in the shower. I was like, when I was thinking about talking to you today, I was like, I should really like, how do I show for those that don't deal with music, like how do I show that, like in the absence of good music, like that thing,
Yeah, right.
in the movies, right? Like take any movie and take like a love scene, fight scene, a drama scene, change the music, and you have an entirely different vibe, an entirely different feel. So in the absence of music or a soundtrack or anything like that, yeah, it would look absolutely ridiculous, right? And that's exactly it, right? But that's the power of music, to introduce a concept or an idea, right? Or to make you feel like the concept or the idea that you think you're experiencing is legitimate, and you're experiencing it with other people too, because the sound means the same to them. And you're looking to your left and your right, and you're like, yeah, this is a fight scene, or jumping out of an airplane scene, or supposed to be a love scene where it's more serious, or somebody just died and now we're going to bring in a little cello and, make sure that we set the tone, and just, as opposed to like an oboe or something, which would be really weird in that moment. It's like, but yeah, that's the power of music. We experience it all the time, but for some reason, businesses sometimes forget about that power. Like when it comes down to that final mile, like they forget like everything they've been taught as consumers or as media participants all their life.
Yeah, man, this is so good. I feel like you and I could jam on this for hours.
And now you see too, like it's like, because I get asked every once in a while from folks that I used to work with in the music business, like, aren't you out there like managing bands, or I ran a record label an independent record label for a little while, with a friend, and we did some great stuff, and I had a Grammy-winning project, and some other like, you could be out there and doing. It's like, I really love this space. Like because I love the power of music in that way. Like if I love connecting people in environments. Like it's that YouTube video where it's like reaction videos, where it's like somebody that's never listened to a song, and it's like, I'm listening to Metallica for the first time, or now listening to Public Enemy for the first time, and like react to that. It's like, I watch those. Like I kind of dig those sometimes, where it's like, well, it's the power of music. Like you've never heard the song, and it's a really powerful song, and then somebody like, I love to be able to help music shape those types of environments and experiences and everything. And it's like, that's as fun to me as, I had a great time putting gold records up on the wall and breaking projects and doing all those things. But I have a great time, like also thinking about how to make music a bigger part of everyone's life in ways that really, and that's just as cool to me as, as a platinum record or something. So.
Yeah, man, your passion 100% comes through. So to wrap us up, I would love to hear like who's doing this well, and maybe like a few pointers for listeners, right? Like people who, a lot of the folks who are listening, this is probably like new territory. They're like, wow, I haven't even thought of this before. So what are some things for them to keep in mind as they consider incorporating this into their business?
Bring up a couple examples, like, and this is just, out of our clients, like, there are a couple that come to mind because we just dealt with some stuff recently. So it's, it's more like these are recent. So they come to mind because of that. There's a client that we deal with called Mood House here in Toronto. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a massage studio. And I always thought that when I think about customers, I think about their, aspirations and their problems and their, and that's the art of the, building a great customer experience, right? Is like thinking about, what are the challenges here, and making sure that those challenges are overcome by the things that you can do for that client. And in the case of Mood House, it's like, oh, this is interesting because Mood House, it's a massage studio, and what are they doing at the end of the day? They're selling an experience where you come in and you relax and you get a great massage, and they're dealing with the same four walls in a strip mall kind of environment that like the ice cream shop is. And like, it's how do you differentiate? Like, it's all about environment, how you separate yourself, how you differentiate yourself, and how do you walk into that experience. You open the same glass door that's, the pharmacy down the street. But instead you're greeted with an experience that automatically takes you to a place to where you're ready to be, in that very personal environment, very, some might say vulnerable. Like what is the everything that happened? And you have 2 minutes go, right? Like you have like this little bit of space in the vestibule and you have a little bit of, like you have music, and they were very particular. And, we had our initial consultations and very thoughtful about how they wanted the music to be shaped around that goal and that talent and that. And, I remember we walked around, and we love these types of clients too. Like we deal with grocery stores that are kind of a different space. Then we deal with more bespoke and boutique stuff like this, which is just fantastic. But I remember walking around and like seeing like kind of like how they had made gentle curves around some of the, and you're taking all of this in and you're like thinking like, what is the musical equivalent? It's like, what music matches this? Like, what music, what do they need to have happen in this environment? You're listening to them because they're saying, hey, for instance, there can't be a lot of silence in between. Like, they were using different services and there was a break and and you think about that. Oh, wait a minute. When you're in that type of environment, there's that uncomfortable, even if it's 2 or 3 seconds pause where there's silence, and then it's a little weird. Like, and you don't want like it. So it's like, oh, I get it. Like, so there has to be more of a better flow. And it's like, oh, we're tuning all these things in, and then looking at the shapes and thinking about the colors and thinking about all the things that they incorporated. And we came up with a soundscape for them that was wonderful, but it was this huge collaborative effort, and it involved physically like showing up and being there and like, kind of feeling it, trying to walk through, close our eyes and walk through how a customer would feel and where we would need to go to meet that level of relaxation, to be that person that's then getting in the massage bed and being a customer there. And they were wonderful in terms of delivering us all the information that we needed to help inform what that program should be in terms of what the specifics were of their business. And, wonderful, thoughtful client. And they're expanding, I know that we're putting together music for another location now. And it's because they've done this so right. Like you walk in there and you're like, let's get a massage. Let's relax. Yeah. The smell and the feel and the look and the, how, the music that's playing, all of it work in concert, as you said, to set that environment so quickly that you're going up and you're making a purchase and you're bought in when you're in the store for one, right? So how we can contribute to that environment. So we love that client. Salted Melon is another that comes to mind, here, because they've had like great success very quickly and they're sprouting locations. I know that we just days ago, I think we plugged in another location, a pop-up location for them where we like, that's how advanced they are. I think about music. They're like, we're doing a pop-up and it needs to be Salted Melon music and the music needs to be thread like, so we love those clients. And so it's like, okay, we're going to do the pop-up, location. We're going to program the music. And what I love about Salted Melon is thoughtful people that are really deeply personally engaged in the business. Like you go in and you see the principals there, they're very curious about what customers are doing, their eyes are moving. And I know they speak to them about music because they talk to us about it. And, in the locations that we program with them, we get feedback. We sit sometimes, like we'll go out to lunch there occasionally just to kind of sit and look around and just make sure everything's okay. And occasionally we'll talk to people about music, but we know that they do it too. And we know that there's if there was, kind of a real time cueing that's happening. And if there was something that didn't work, we're going to hear about it. If there was a song or a treatment or a different day part that they needed in a different space, we're going to hear about it from them. And I think that's part of the magic of why they've been successful. Because again, like you or I might look at it, like you walk in there and like, it just feels right. It just feels like a place where breakfast turns into lunch. I had a breakfast meeting, and now I'm here 3 hours later and I'm going to see this other client. That's, I'm just going to stick around. I'm going to see him at noon. And it just feels right. And it feels like a smart space to be in. Like you're never going to get caught feeling you're unhip in one of those places, or like if you're going to see it, like it just, how does all of that, like all that happens down to the minutia part of which is music. And we love programming those spaces and getting that feedback. And so I think those are two that do it right. And the reason that they do it right is because you don't have to be overly engaged. You're running your business, but you do have to listen to your customers. And that involves, hey, how do you feel about the music? How do you feel about this environment? How do you feel about this? And, we take that feedback, we develop it into something that's a working plan. But two businesses local to Charlotte that are really engaged with music that I think are having growth spurts right now. And perhaps music is a part of that because these environments that they've set are so much a part of their success. Wonderful environments. And, again, two businesses that are showing it through success.
Yeah.
And like outside of what we do, I would add like interesting, case study would be like Trader Joe's. we don't work with Trader Joe's, but, we're curious about what they do because, we have several thousand grocery clients and, we're always interested in what others are doing in that space. And, they do a little bit more of an employee jukebox. And for the employees, like if you notice, like if you walk into Trader Joe's, the employees are always out on the floor. That's constant stocking, right? So the employees are engaged in the customer space all the time. So they have to walk this tightrope. Like in other grocery stores, the stocking might occur at midnight, right? And you don't see people out on the floor. There might be only one or two employees generally out on the floor stocking. But you're in a Trader Joe's and it's constant part of their, I don't know a lot about their distribution system, but it seems like they have that kind of just-in-time feel where they're putting stuff out very quickly. And that involves employees out on the floor, and then involves then employees engaged in the space. So then when we talk about in the employee side of music, all of a sudden that becomes important. And, we were going through, we spitball stuff, and we were going through Trader Joe's just as a case study internally a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about that. It's like, well, it's kind of like it's an interesting mix, turned up on the employee level, turned down on the customer level, maybe. It feels a little bit more like an employee jukebox. And they got that part of it right. But customer experience is a little, I don't feel when I'm standing in front of that wine section at Trader Joe's that I'm really challenged to, am I really challenged to stand there and just, how is the music playing into that? We talked through that a little bit. So I think that that's a case of getting one part right, but one part wrong. Like there's a little bit better balance. So just a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah. I think, the crux of what you're kind of pointing at is you have to be thoughtful and intentional about it. Like you have to actually be aware. So I think that like for folks on, listening, it's like start to ask yourself the question of how might my customer or employee feel in this space with this music? And then kind of like connected to that thought is this idea of like, do your homework, talk to your customers, like understand, and your employees talk and understand where they're, where it's good, where it's not good. Right. I think sometimes people forget to like put themselves in the environment. Like I love the salted melon example because to your point, like, the owners are there, they're feeling it, they're experiencing it, and they're able to say, this doesn't really sound right, or this doesn't feel right, or there's something missing here. And so I think those are like tactical things, like taking that time to really immerse yourself to feel what others are feeling. And I think one thing I wanted to poke on, you did a great job talking about this through the conversation. And you shared this, with me at coffee, like it's not acceptable to just like turn on Spotify on your personal account in your business, right? Like it's actually not okay. You'll get fined. And so I think it's another tactical thing people can do is just like, you should probably call somebody like a Brian, right? And have an expert help you so that you don't get hit with a $75,000 lawsuit because you played music off of your personal Spotify playlist, right?
Yeah, I think I told you a crazy story. I think I shared this with you about the restaurant that was close to our first office.
Yeah.
The owner came up to us at one point. One of the owners, what do you guys do? It's like, oh, we're in the music business. We do business background music. Maybe you know something about this. And he produced all these letters that he had gotten from one of the PROs, performance rights organizations, ASCAP, BMI, CSAP, that collect money on behalf of songwriters for the use of songs in public environments, right? Whether Coliseum or a retail store or any place you're publicly playing music, performing music, there is a royalty that's due to songwriters for that person that wrote and scripted the lyrics and the song, the composition, right? So that's the basics of that. And there is no way around that. That is by congressional consent decree that those organizations exist because Congress many moons ago said, all right, we understand the songwriters have to get paid for the commercial use of their music. If you're using music to sell more stuff or to do things commercially, then there probably should be pittance that these guys get, that they get paid for, for the use of that music, right? So they said, you guys go form these societies, and we'll anoint you to be the sole collection agencies for the music that's played, right? So by law, these exist. It's not that they're trying to sell you a license. There's nothing to sell you. They are the enforcement arm of a congressional decree, consent decree, right? So there's no negotiating. It's the law. So when they send you a notice and they say, here's where if so long as they're correct in saying, yeah, there is music that's playing, and that portion of music that's playing, yeah, that is you're playing X week, they'll do what they call a census, and they'll identify 5 or 6 artists maybe and say, on this date, you played this, and this. these are all ASCAP artists. And then BMI will say, well, you played these, and these are all BMI artists, or CSAC, smaller list, private organization, and they'll say, you played my artists. And then they'll say, and you owe this. And then that's it. There's no negotiating. There's no, I'm going to shop this around and buy it from the other guy. There's no, it is enforcement. It is not, it's not a commercial, commercial play. So, we said, you need to respond to those, because part of it was for live music. You have to pay a little bit extra if you have live music and people are playing cover tunes, and then the use of music that's in store. When you go with a service like us, you exist under our blanket license, right? So you don't pay any of that to them. But if you don't, they're going to come to you directly. And when you do, like anything else in life, if it's not pre-negotiated, it's always going to be more expensive, or worse, they're going to go back and they're going to try to retro something, and then they're going to take fines and fees. And again, there's no day in court. There's no recourse. There's no, you can't argue with them. It's like, this is the law. We are the collection arm of the law. You're going to have to pay this. I would, mention to this guy, I said, you got to pay attention to that. Because it's like, and he's like, showed us, I got my Spotify account. I'm playing this over the speakers, and I'm just, we're doing some live music on the weekends, and we don't have to pay. And I was like, those are all red flags. Like, this is real. Like, these guys are, and lo and behold, like, I think it was after we had moved, like we moved down Moorhead into another location. I think it was after we moved, page 3 of the Charlotte Observer, businesses hit with massive fines by BMI or STAP or one of they came into the market. And this is one of the businesses that they tagged. And they'll do this. They'll come in and they'll make an example out of a couple of dozen people. And then they'll go on for a couple of years, and then they'll come back to Charlotte and they'll, pop a couple of dozen, but the fines are huge. And considering what it costs, we really haven't talked about costs. Like, what is it for us to do this right? Like, at a base, like there are some bottom feeder services where just picking something off a playlist where you're paying like, $20 or $30 a month. And our service starts, kind of just north of that. Like, and you get into this bespoke stuff, and you might be 50% more or something like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's less than your cable bill. Like, it's like, it's ridiculous. It's like, it's to stay compliant is extremely inexpensive as compared, it makes great economical sense as compared to the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines that you'll be slapped with, because it's $75,000 per infringement per song. And they'll just have fun stopping at 5 or 6 songs. They could do probably 100 at that point, right? But the point is that they're probably saying, well, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. So, you'll pay $50,000 and we'll call it a day. And you're like, $50,000? It's crazy. It's like, it could be 750 or probably even more if we took it to the letter of the law. So then you wind up paying it. And these guys wound up paying these exorbitant fines, and they were out of business like within a couple of months. Like, this is our business. We consult people on how to do this right, on music rights, and making sure that you're buttoned up and everything. And we were willing to give this guy some free advice at that point. And it just, we didn't connect with it. He didn't connect with it. And we felt terrible. It's like, we wish we would have grabbed him by the lapels now and said, no, you ghost of Christmas future. You are going to lose your business over this. Like, oh, how did we know? But I'd say it makes us more vigilant, because if you are a business and you are performing music, you're playing music in a commercial environment, and you're not sourcing that music from somebody that pays that royalty, that commercial business royalty, and that is not Spotify, that is not Apple, it's not something, a consumer service that's sourced from your phone. That is a different level of service like ours or the others that exist. Then you are not paying that royalty. Royalty is not being paid to the songwriters. And eventually somebody might come knock on your door. You might get a notice. They have folks that sit on markets, and they conduct audits in markets, and they look for folks that are infringing. And it's an easy letter to send somebody to say, here's what you owe, and we'll settle for $10,000. And that $10,000 is a lot of money to a small business, but it may be more. And for these guys, it was a lot more. And then they're business. Oh no! But that's the jeopardy. There's certainly above and beyond just good, like, customer experience sense, which is really why anyone should be motivated to do this for their employees, for their customers. There absolutely is a very hard legal line that you fall on one side or the other. If you're not playing licensed music that's licensed for business and dealing with a legit provider that's in that space, then you are an infringer, and it is a hard road to travel once they identify you.
Yeah. That's good, man. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. Where can folks find you online?
Thank you. Musicbycanopy.com is us. Music by Canopy. Drew, you put up my LinkedIn information. Please feel free to do so, and phone number and everything. For anyone that has any questions, we love talking about music. And if you're curious about music in your own business environment, happy to talk to anybody just to kind of spitball some things, whether that goes somewhere or not. Like I always like to hear case studies and examples of use cases for music, whether or not we wind up dealing with it or not. Like it's fun to kind of think about where music can be used or where it's being used. Legal questions too. We don't like to dispense a lot of legal advice, but the basics of it, like just telling you whether or not you need to think about something or give us a call. We'll be happy to walk you through that. And, because there's a number of it's a minefield. There are a lot of different ways that music needs to be licensed and properly sourced, even if you're using it in a business presentation, if you're using it online. Our sister company, Eversong, deals exclusively in that space, deals with just licensing for TV commercials, commercial presentations, anywhere that you use music in a commercial sense, we can figure out how to wrap a license around it and make it legal. So I'm always happy to talk to folks about whether or not they think that they're going to require some extra level of protection or licensing to ensure that they're okay.
Awesome. And folks, you can find me online, pretty much every social platform at Drew H. Burdick and drewburdick.com. Brian, dude, we could talk for hours, man. This is a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Drew. Great being here.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you could take a second, hit the subscribe button below. It would really mean the world. I'm trying to make some great content for you every week by interviewing folks and hearing what they have to say about building great experiences. I try to share tips and tricks and things like that. Anyways, take a second, hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.